The night the cabin was attacked began like any other quiet escape into the wilderness. 4 friends drove deep into the northern forest, chasing the promise of isolation, fresh air, and a break from the noise of everyday life. The road narrowed into gravel, then dirt, then barely a path at all. Towering pines closed in from both sides, their branches blocking out the fading sunlight. By the time they reached the cabin, dusk had already settled, and the woods felt unnaturally silent. The cabin itself was old, built decades ago by a trapper who had long since vanished. Weathered logs formed its walls, and the windows were small and thick with dust. There was no cell service, no nearby neighbors, and no sound except the wind brushing through the trees. At first, the isolation felt peaceful. They unloaded their supplies, lit a fire inside the stone fireplace, and laughed about how dramatic the setting felt, like something out of a horror movie. As night fell, the forest changed. The usual chorus of insects faded, replaced by a heavy stillness. One of them noticed it first and joked about how quiet it had become, but the unease lingered. Around midnight, a sound echoed from the trees. It was deep, long, and unlike any animal call they recognized. It wasn't a howl or a roar. It sounded almost like a distorted scream, carrying pain and rage at the same time. They froze. The fire crackled softly as the sound repeated, closer now. Someone suggested it might be an elk or a bear, but no one sounded convinced. Bears didn't scream like that. The noise moved through the woods with surprising speed, circling the cabin rather than approaching directly. Footsteps followed, heavy and deliberate, shaking the ground with each step. Then came the smell. A strong, musky odor seeped through the cracks in the walls, thick and rotten, like wet fur in decay. The air inside the cabin felt heavier, harder to breathe. One of the windows suddenly rattled as something brushed against it from the outside. Slowly, carefully, someone pulled back the curtain just enough to look. What stared back was not a bear. A massive shape stood just beyond the glass, taller than the window frame. Dark hair covered its body in uneven patches, and its shoulders were impossibly broad. The face was partially hidden in shadow, but its eyes reflected the firelight inside the cabin. They were large, intelligent, and unmistakably focused. The creature leaned closer, fogging the glass with each breath. Panic took over. They backed away as a loud thud slammed into the cabin wall. The entire structure shuddered, dust falling from the ceiling. Another udar followed, stronger this time, like something testing the walls. A deep growl rumbled through the logs, vibrating through their chests. Whatever was outside knew they were inside, and it wanted in. One of them grabbed a flashlight and shined it through a crack in the door. The beam revealed massive footprints in the dirt, each one far larger than any human's. The creature moved quickly, its shadow passing in front of the door, then the window, then disappearing behind the cabin. Suddenly, a loud crash exploded from the back wall as something slammed into it with full force. The door shook violently. The handle rattled as if being tested by an enormous hand. Claws scraped against the wood, slow and deliberate, leaving deep gouges. The friends screamed, pushing furniture against the door in a desperate attempt to reinforce it. The cabin groaned, old wood straining under pressure it was never meant to endure. Outside, the creature roared, a deafening sound that felt almost human in its anger. It began pounding on the walls, moving from one side to the other with terrifying speed. Each impact echoed through the forest, as if the woods themselves were listening. At one point, a shadow passed across the roof, followed by heavy footsteps above them. Whatever this thing was, it was strong enough to climb. The attack lasted for what felt like hours but was probably only minutes. Just as suddenly as it began, the pounding stopped. The forest fell silent again, broken only by their frantic breathing and the crackle of the dying fire. No one moved, no one spoke. They sat frozen, waiting for the next udar that never came. At dawn, pale light filtered through the windows, revealing the damage. Deep claw marks scored the door. One wall had partially collapsed inward. Outside, the ground was torn apart, trees snapped like twigs, and those massive footprints led back into the forest, vanishing among the shadows. There were no signs of any known animal, no explanation that made sense. They left immediately, abandoning their gear and driving until the forest finally loosened its grip. None of them reported the incident. They knew how it would sound. But every one of them carries the memory of those eyes in the dark, the intelligence behind them, and the certainty that what attacked that cabin was not a legend, not a story, but something real that still walks the forests, watching, waiting, and sometimes knocking on the doors of those who wander too far into its territory.